Well, as we think about what it means to be an evangelistic community, let's remind ourselves of our vision and mission statement. We exist to grow followers of Jesus. We seek to do this by being a biblical, spirit-led, evangelistic, caring community of all ages and many cultures. That's our vision and mission statement here at Riverton. We exist to grow followers of Jesus. And our vision is that we want to be a biblical, spirit-led, evangelistic, caring community of all ages and many cultures. So Pastor Wayne kicked off the series a couple of weeks ago looking at what does it mean to be biblical. And you can find that message online. And then Kenny spoke last week about what does it mean to be spirit-led. What does it mean to worship God with all we are? And today we're looking at this word evangelistic. What does that even mean? It's not an English word, I'll give you that. It comes from the Greek. And I'll explain a little bit about why we use that word here at Riverton. Now, evangelistic comes from the Greek word, or two Greek words, meaning good news. And we saw in this story that Pat read for us that Philip shared the good news. He was led by God, by the Spirit, to meet this Ethiopian man in the middle of nowhere, basically, on a road, on a quiet road, not even a main road. And he meets him at just the right time, where he's reading this scroll of Isaiah out loud. And in those days, people read out loud, mostly. It was how you read, particularly if you weren't very familiar with the language. And so you would read it out loud. And so Philip walks up to this man at the very point where he's reading a scripture that was written hundreds of years ago, pointing to the Messiah, looking forwards to the Messiah. And so Philip was able to give him the good news, that what he was reading was actually about Jesus. It's an incredible story if you think about that God moved in such a way to bring these two people together at such a point, almost a gift for Philip to be able to say, hey, that what you're reading, that is actually about Jesus. I wonder if you've ever experienced an encounter where God has met you. We've just heard 5 stories of where God has met people and captured their attention, grabbed their attention. I wonder if you've had that experience where God has met you where you're at. Or perhaps we're still longing for God to answer those deep questions in our heart. Well, that Ethiopian man, he was searching. He was in search for questions. He was in searching for answers for the deep questions that he had. Who was this person he was reading about? He'd just been in Jerusalem worshipping God, but that didn't answer all his questions. He wanted to know who this person was that he was reading about. I wonder if you've got deep questions. I wonder what would be good news to you today. We are an evangelistic community because we want to bring good news, because Jesus is good news. So this word evangelistic, I've mentioned a couple of times. As I said, it comes from the Greek, and it's made up of 2 words, good and news. You'll see in the word, I've got the Greek up there, which I might try and pronounce for you, but evangelistic is made up of 2 words. You can see one word in the middle of it, angel. And angel in Greek is messenger or news. And the little bit at the front, ev, or in the Greek it would be you, it would pronounce you, that means good. So good news. That's where we get this word from. And this word is used to describe what Philip gave to the man, to this Ethiopian man. He gave him good news. Right from the very beginning, people saw Jesus as good news. In fact, in Mark chapter 1, one of the earliest writings about Jesus, the opening verse, Mark chapter 1, verse 1, this is the good news about Jesus. When you see good news in the Bible, you know it's this word. Euangelion, I think is how you pronounce it, or something like that. I'm not an ancient Greek writer or speaker. But that's where we get these 2 words, good news, from. Which is tricky, because in our culture today, when we hear news, our culture wants to deliver the facts. We're not going to tell you it's good. It's up for you. Kids, when you're playing a game, you might play a game of uni, as I do with my kids. You get some good cards. They're good news for you if you get lots of draw forwards, but perhaps not so good news for the people you're playing with, right? Sometimes that's how we interpret news. In fact, I was I did a little bit of a search. If you search for Good News Perth, you come up with, 9 News is the first website that comes up, and they actually have a segment called Good News. These are some of the titles of what they consider good news. Firstly, up the top, New South Wales election, have your say. Now, that's an interesting way to start your page on good news, isn't it? That there's going to be a new premier in New South Wales, potentially. Second, now this is probably better news, using the ocean to treat trauma for people suffering PTSD, to find peace in the water. That's pretty good. Third on the list, winner 2022 river fire experience. I feel like they haven't updated their website, but river fire, I think that's bad context. I'm not sure if I'd put those words together. Oh, here's some more good news. Unique superhero costumes help sick Aussie kids in hospital. Someone's developed this new gown for kids to wear that makes you look like a superhero, but doctors can access all the things they need to access. I think that's pretty good news. That's relatively good. Oh, then we go down to dog pictures. So this is the good news. As much good news as we've got. More dog news. Oh, a woman wins 60 million in lottery. So we're really, and then this one really got my attention. German nudist forced to chase cheeky boar thief. A pig ran off with the nudist bag. I mean, this is the sort of good news that our society thinks is good. It's interesting, isn't it? It's all relative good news, but here's the thing. We're an evangelistic community because we truly have good news. See, in our culture today, we don't really think of news as being good or bad. We want to give people the facts. We want to let them discern whether it's good or not. But this is the thing about this word. This word was used originally in the Greek culture, in the Roman culture, for news that they were telling people were good news. So it was used to proclaim new Roman emperors when they were crowned as emperor. That was good news for people. It was told, this is good news for you. It was also used in the context of Roman victories, military victories. So it was proclaimed, good news. This is good news for you, and here's what the news is. Much different to how we think of good news. We're not going to tell you it's good news. We're going to let you make up your own mind. This word was quickly picked up by the early church because they believed, and we believe, that the news about Jesus is truly good. It's not open for interpretation. It is truly good news. And to be evangelistic as a community means we believe that the news about Jesus is good for everyone, for the whole world, for everyone of all time. The news about Jesus is truly good. Now, of course, evangelistic means we want to share the good news with others. I don't know about you, but I know some pretty evangelistic people. I know people who are evangelistic about their sports teams or about their latest cleaning product they're trying to sell me. People can be evangelistic about many things, can't they? It oozes out of them. Perhaps you know someone like that. It's quite easy to spot online. People post all the time, don't they? About things they're trying to get you to sell or get you to buy. I know someone online who's always posting about her organic cleaning products. And I'm sure they're great, but I'm not really interested. Thank you. But I'd probably describe her as evangelistic because she talks about it everywhere. When she's going to the gym, she'll post something about going to the gym and there's a great cleaning product for this. She talks about it when she's struggling to sleep. She talks about it when she's going to a cafe. It just oozes out of her all the time. Being evangelistic. Of course, when we meet people like this can be a little bit negative, can't it? It has that negative connotation. And when we think about evangelism, perhaps we think a bit negative about it. We perhaps think about people who just want to tell us things and don't stop to listen to us. I mean, I had a lovely lady knock on my door the other week trying to sell me HelloFresh, and that was great. But did she stop and ask me how I'm going? Or what do I need? Or what do I eat? Do I cook? Do I have time to cook? No, she was just asking me about and telling me how good these products were. And it's a great way to start the new year. It's a great way to be fit. But she didn't stop and ask me, do I actually need it? Do I actually want it? Sometimes we can have that negative connotation about evangelism or being evangelistic. And I don't want you to think about that's what I'm talking about here today. When we talk about being evangelistic as a church, we believe we carry good news for everyone. And we need to be wise in how we share that. And we see here in this story about Philip, he was wise about how he shared the good news he had about Jesus. God had led him to meet this person on a back road in the middle of nowhere. And do you know what he did? Being directed to this person, he goes up to him and asks him a question. He says, "Do you know what you're reading? Do you understand it?" That's a great question. Of course, the encounter could have been gone quite differently, perhaps, if the Ethiopian wrote, "Yep, I've all got it. I'm okay. I don't need your help." Philip might have just continued. But it didn't. It started a conversation. This relationship started to form, and it was in the context of this conversation and relationship that Philip was then able to proclaim the good news. It says there in verse 35, so beginning with this same passage of Scripture that the man was reading, he then begins to tell him about the good news about Jesus. That's being evangelistic, being led by God, being obedient to God, carrying the good news, and doing it wisely in a way that it's understood and heard, not in a negative way. Sometimes how we share the good news is actually just as important as what it is we have to share. Now, we've seen several people today take this step of proclaiming the message of the good news about Jesus in being baptized. The act of baptism, as Wayne mentioned, is a proclamation of the good news that we carry. That Jesus has laid his life down and that he has also resurrected to new life and promises new life to each one of us, should we too choose to lay down our life in his footsteps, giving up on our own life to please ourselves, living a new life to please him. The good news is essentially that Jesus saves us from sin and its effects. But we can also talk about the good news in many other ways, and I've got a list on the screen here. The good news about Jesus we proclaim is that Jesus restores the relationship between us and our Creator God. Jesus takes our shame and gives us honor. Jesus cancels our debt through his sacrifice so that we can stand before God. We are given new identity as sons and daughters of God. Jesus gives us a hope for heaven to come where they will be free from pain and suffering. The good news is Jesus brings us peace between God and ourselves. Jesus heals our brokenness. Jesus is the anointed Messiah. I could keep going. There's many ways we can talk about the good news of Jesus. I wonder if Philip, we don't know what particularly he said to this man, but I wonder if he started with, well, Jesus is the anointed Messiah. This is what the passage in Isaiah that you just read talks about, that he was the one promised to come who would rescue us from our own sin and shame. I wonder if that's where Philip started. But we can talk about the good news in many ways to people who are searching and asking many different questions about life, faith, and meaning. The good news about Jesus is truly good for everyone, no matter their situation, no matter their circumstance. They just have to be willing to listen and seek to understand. Jesus is good news for those who are broken, for those who are rich, for those who are alone or wounded or suffering or are starting new jobs, those who are new in a country, new in a house. Jesus is good news. He is good news to everyone, no matter their situation. And it's important as we as a community gather together to be able to proclaim the good news about Jesus. And here's why it's important. We gather together because of Jesus. He is the center of everything. His Spirit unites us together as one body. In Ephesians chapter 1, it says this: God has put all things under the authority of Christ and has made him head over all things for the benefit of the church. And the church is his body. It is made full and complete by Christ, who fills all things everywhere with himself. We are gathered together as a church community because and for Jesus. Our community is not our own. It actually belongs to Jesus. And we are here because of him. Therefore, his priority is our priority. In Matthew chapter 8, Jesus gives the Great Commission to us and to the disciples. He says, I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have for you. And be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. So as a church, we are gathered together because and for Jesus. He is our head, our guide, our authority. And his priority is our priority. We carry the good news that he has given. His command to go and make disciples mean that each one of us, and as a body together, are here to proclaim the good news and to make disciples. A disciple is someone who simply follows after. If we think about Jesus having 12 disciples, they followed after Jesus and they carried on his message after he went back to heaven. So we too are called to make disciples, those who would follow after Jesus, not ourselves. And that they too would carry his message with wherever they go. This is why we call ourselves evangelistic, because we believe Jesus is good news and because he has commanded us to carry it and to proclaim it. We are not evangelistic about great music or great programs or the latest social media trends or the latest fashion trends. No, we are evangelistic about the good news of Jesus. And we have that as our priority, bringing that to those who are in need, bringing that to a world who is asking questions about life, faith, and meaning. And I think Philip understood the importance of making disciples. After speaking to this Ethiopian man, he then sets off at once. He baptizes him and then sets off, and off he goes. And he's carried away. And he goes all the way, preaching the good news about Jesus. So we are evangelistic, which means we have good news to carry. We bring good news wisely, so it may be heard and understood to everyone who is asking different questions about faith, life, and meaning. It's not just maybe as simple as saying Jesus saves you. Someone might only believe that if he makes sense in their deepest wound, if he actually makes sense to the question that they are asking. And so we need to learn how to communicate the good news about Jesus in a way that it will be heard and understood. And we need to be clear we're bringing good news about Jesus and not about other things that might be good, that might be trivial. And Jesus has commissioned us to bring good news. He has commissioned you, if you call yourself a follower of Jesus, he has commissioned you to bring good news to those around you.